The ocean floor was eerily silent. Bikini Bottom, once a bustling underwater metropolis filled with laughter and joy, now felt like it had been abandoned by fate itself. It wasn't just humans who were susceptible to the rage virus. It seemed that every living creature could fall victim to its insidious grip. And in this world, even sponges weren't safe. SpongeBob SquarePants stood outside the Krusty Krab, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced with wide-eyed panic. He clutched a spatula tightly as if it might protect him from what lurked beyond the coral streets. Beside him, Patrick Star cowered behind a trash can lid, muttering nonsensically about jellyfish parties being canceled forever. "SpongeBob," Patrick whimpered, "do you think there'll still be donuts after all this?" "I don't know, Patrick," SpongeBob replied, trying to sound brave despite the chaos around them. "Right now, we need to focus on staying alive." Behind them, Squidward tentacles leaned against the doorframe of the Krusty Krab, arms crossed, face pale, or as pale as an octopus could get. His monocle hung loosely around his neck, forgotten amidst the madness. "If I'd known working at a burger joint would lead me here," he muttered bitterly, "I'd have quit years ago." Gary the snail slithered out from under a barrel nearby, leaving a trail of slime as he observed the scene. His meows carried a strange sense of urgency, almost as if he understood more than anyone else did. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the street. A zombified clam burst through the window of Mrs. Puff's boating school, sending shards of glass scattering into the water. Inside, Mrs. Puff screamed as she tried to fend off the creature with her boating manual. Her attempts were futile. The infected clam lunged forward, tearing into her flesh with jagged teeth. "No!" SpongeBob shouted, dropping his spatula and rushing toward the school. "SpongeBob, wait!" Squidward yelled, grabbing his arm. "You can't!" But SpongeBob yanked free and dove inside. Patrick hesitated for only a moment before following suit, while Squidward groaned in exasperation and reluctantly trailed after them. Inside, the carnage was horrifying. Blood pooled across the floor, staining the carpets crimson. Mrs. Puff lay sprawled against the wall, her eyes vacant, her body torn apart. The clam thrashed wildly, drooling viscous black liquid that bubbled menacingly in the water. "Stay back!" SpongeBob warned, raising a chair defensively. The clam turned its attention to him, growling deep in its shell before charging. SpongeBob swung the chair, smashing it against the creature's head. It stumbled but didn't stop, forcing Patrick to intervene. "Let me handle this!" Patrick bellowed, shoving SpongeBob aside and tackling the clam. They rolled across the room, the clam snapping viciously as Patrick fought back with surprising strength. Finally, he managed to pin it down, slamming its own shell over its mouth. "It's dead?" Patrick gasped, panting heavily. For a moment, they stared at each other in stunned silence. Then, suddenly, the clam began to stir again. Before either of them could react, it broke free of Patrick's grip and sank its teeth into his arm. "Patrick!" SpongeBob cried, watching in horror as his best friend screamed in agony. Meanwhile, at the Krusty Krab, Mr. Krabs paced nervously behind the counter, clutching a wad of cash close to his chest. Pearl, his daughter, sat huddled in the corner, tears streaming down her face. "Daddy, what's happening?" she sobbed. "Why are people acting so crazy?" "I don't rightly know, lass," Mr. Krabs admitted, though he sounded far less concerned about humanity's survival than he did about his profits. "But one thing's for sure, we ain't leaving until I've secured me fortune." Squidward entered the restaurant then, dragging Gary behind him. "We need to leave," he snapped. "Now, that thing is coming back, and it brought friends." Mr. Krabs scoffed. "Leave my business? Never. This place is mine, and I won't abandon it." "You're going to die if you stay here," Squidward shouted, throwing up his hands in frustration. Just then, a group of infected fish swarmed the entrance, their glowing red eyes reflecting hunger and rage. One of them smashed through the front window, causing everyone to scatter. Pearl let out a blood-curdling scream as a pufferfish lunged at her. She barely managed to dodge as it exploded into spines, impaling several others nearby. Mr. Krabs, however, wasn't so lucky. A barracuda slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. As the others watched in terror, the creature began gnawing on his legs. "Save your money, ye fools!" Mr. Krabs shrieked, clutching his wounds as the infection spread rapidly through his body. Within seconds, his eyes turned bloodshot, and he rose shakily, now part of the horde. Pearl froze, staring at her father as he advanced toward her. "Daddy, no," she whispered, backing away slowly. Back at Mrs. Puff's boating school, SpongeBob cradled Patrick in his arms, watching helplessly as the infection took hold. Patrick's skin grew pale, his breathing shallow. Within minutes, his eyes glazed over, and he let out a low growl. "Patrick!" SpongeBob choked, shaking him gently. "Come on, buddy, snap out of it!" But it was too late. Patrick surged forward, snarling, and SpongeBob barely managed to scramble away. The transformed Patrick collided with the wall, already consumed by the rage virus. Just then, Sandy Cheeks burst through the door, clad in her diving suit and armed with a crowbar. "Y'all okay?" she demanded, scanning the room. "Not really," SpongeBob exclaimed, dodging another attack from Patrick. "He's..." Before he could finish, Patrick lunged again, forcing Sandy to strike him down with the crowbar. Patrick collapsed, unmoving, as Sandy lowered the weapon slowly. "I'm sorry, SpongeBob," she said softly, her voice trembling beneath the helmet. "There wasn't anything we could do." SpongeBob stared at Patrick's lifeless form, tears streaming down his cheeks. For the first time in his life, he felt utterly powerless. As night fell over Bikini Bottom, the survivors regrouped at Sandy's tree dome. Gary coiled himself protectively around SpongeBob, who remained silent and withdrawn. Squidward sat on the couch, nursing a drink he'd salvaged from the Krusty Krab, while Sandy monitored the perimeter outside. "We can't stay here forever," Sandy declared, breaking the tense silence. "The infection is spreading faster than we thought. Soon there won't be anywhere left to hide." "What do you suggest we do?" Squidward asked sarcastically. "Swim to the surface? Join the rest of the infected topside?" Sandy ignored him. "We find shelter somewhere secure, somewhere isolated, maybe the chum bucket. It's abandoned now, and Plankton's gone missing since all this started." SpongeBob finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "We can't give up. Not yet." Squidward raised an eyebrow. "Oh, great, here comes the motivational speech." But SpongeBob continued, determination sparking in his eyes. "We'll make it through this together. Patrick taught me that nothing is impossible when you believe in yourself, and I believe in us." Sandy smiled faintly. "Well said, SpongeBob. Let's gear up. Tomorrow, we move." As the group prepared for the journey ahead, none of them realized the true nature of the twist waiting for them. Little did they know, the rage virus wasn't just spreading, it was evolving. And soon, it would force them to confront not only the monsters outside, but also the darkness within themselves. Next morning, the survivors, SpongeBob, Squidward, Gary, and Sandy, prepared to leave for the chum bucket. The journey would be perilous, but they had no choice. Bikini Bottom was descending into chaos, with infected creatures roaming every corner of the town. "All right, team," Sandy said, strapping on her utility belt filled with tools and weapons. "We stick together. One wrong move and we're shark bait." "I don't see why we have to go to his place," Squidward grumbled, referring to Plankton. "That tiny little devil probably deserved whatever happened to him." SpongeBob looked at him solemnly. "Squidward, we need somewhere safe, and if Karen's still working, maybe she can help us find a way to stop this." Squidward sighed, but didn't argue further. Gary meowed in agreement, his slimy body coiled tightly around SpongeBob's leg. When they arrived at the chum bucket, the sight was grim. The front door hung off its hinges, and inside, Plankton's lab was in disarray. A trail of blood led to a dark corner where Plankton's remains lay sprawled across the floor. His eyes were wide open, frozen in terror. "Oh my gosh," SpongeBob whispered, covering his mouth. Karen's screen flickered to life, her voice echoing through the room. "Hello, intruders. Please step away from my husband's corpse unless you want to join him." Sandy stepped forward, hands raised. "Karen, it's me, Sandy Cheeks. We're not here to hurt you or Plankton. We just need your help." Karen's tone softened slightly. "Sandy? Is that really you? What's going on? Why does everything look like a horror movie set?" SpongeBob explained everything. The infection, the attacks, the loss of friends, and how they needed her expertise to try and create a cure. Karen processed the information quickly. "As much as I hate helping anyone connected to the Krusty Krab, I suppose this situation trumps petty rivalry. Bring me a sample of the virus, and I'll see what I can do." The following day, the group ventured back to Mrs. Puff's boating school, armed with nets, crowbars, and determination. Their goal was simple: retrieve a blood sample from an infected creature without getting killed themselves. This is insane, Squidward muttered as they approached the school. Why couldn't we just ask Patrick nicely for a donation? SpongeBob froze mid-step. Wait, Patrick, he's out there somewhere. Maybe we can lure him back. Sandy nodded thoughtfully. It's worth a shot. Infected or not, he's still technically alive. If we can get him under control, we might be able to study him directly. They set up a trap using leftover ketchup packets to mimic fresh blood. Sure enough, within minutes a familiar figure emerged from the shadows, a bloated, snarling version of Patrick Star. There he is, SpongeBob gasped, both horrified and hopeful. Patrick lunged toward the bait, allowing Sandy to dart forward and inject a tranquilizer dart into his side. With a roar, Patrick collapsed onto the ground. We did it, SpongeBob cheered, though his smile faltered when he saw Patrick's grotesque state. But now we've got to bring him back. Back at the chum bucket, Karen worked tirelessly in Plankton's lab, analyzing the virus extracted from Patrick's blood. Over the next week, she developed a potential antidote, which she presented to the group with cautious optimism. It won't reverse the damage instantly, Karen warned, but theoretically it should neutralize the virus over time. Once administered, it could take days or even weeks for full recovery. Sandy reviewed the data carefully. It looks solid, Karen. Let's test it on Patrick first. If it works, we can expand production. The next phase was risky. They lured Patrick back to the chum bucket, securing him in a reinforced cell. As Sandy injected the antidote into his arm, everyone held their breath. At first, nothing happened. Then Patrick began to convulse violently, his screams echoing throughout the lab. SpongeBob watched through the glass, tears streaming down his face. Is it working? He asked desperately. It has to be, Sandy replied, gripping the edge of the counter. Hold on, Patrick. Hours passed, then days. Slowly but surely, Patrick's symptoms began to subside. The red glow faded from his eyes and his breathing steadied. Finally, after 3 agonizing days, Patrick opened his eyes. Where am I? He mumbled groggily. You're home, buddy, SpongeBob sobbed, hugging him tightly. You're back. Over the following month, the group distributed the antidote cautiously, targeting small groups of infected individuals. Gradually, Bikini Bottom began to heal. Those who hadn't reanimated remained dead, leaving behind empty shells of loved ones. But for those who survived, life slowly returned to some semblance of normalcy. One evening, as the sun dipped below the waves, the group gathered outside the chum bucket to reflect on everything that had transpired. It feels weird saying this, Squidward admitted, sipping a drink, but I'm glad we stuck together. Without you guys, I'd probably be floating face down in jellyfish fields right now. Sandy smiled faintly. This whole experience showed me something important. Even in the darkest times, hope can survive if we fight for it. SpongeBob glanced at Patrick, who was happily munching on a donut. And because of that hope, we've got each other again. That's all that matters. Gary meowed softly, curling up beside SpongeBob. Karen's voice chimed in from inside. Though I must admit, I never expected to work alongside the competition. Still, good job, everyone. As the night deepened, the survivors stood together, united by tragedy and triumph alike. Bikini Bottom may never fully recover, but for these few, the bonds forged during the apocalypse would last forever. And so, beneath the stars of the underwater world, they found peace, in memory of those lost and in gratitude for those still standing.